Could dragons survive real life? Many people have made videos on how dragons could evolve or how they could exist, but not many have done how would dragons as they are depicted appear in real life. Now, most dragons that you see in popular media now are enormous, so probably be too big to function. However, there's one group of dragons that I feel is actually worth discussing. This being the proposed biological dragons from Animal Planet's pretty cool documentary, Last Dragon, or as I knew it, Dragons, a Fantasy Made Real.
Throughout our history, one creature above all others has haunted our imagination. On land and in the air, the dragon has left its mark in the folklore of our ancestors. But what if these fantastic stories were more than myth? What if the legends were true? This is the story of a unique family that survived from the time of the dinosaur to make a final stand in the Middle Ages. This is the natural history of the most extraordinary creature that never existed.
A lineage that first appeared during the Mesozoic and lasting into the Middle Ages. But this documentary is about 20 years old. A lot has changed in the knowledge of the prehistoric past. So what would change about these reptilian nightmares? And could they really survive in the real world? We'll be taking the dragons as they were depicted in the documentary and placing them into similar or the same environments. However, they will not have the benefit of being these new strange alien life forms that nothing's familiar with, as a sort of invasive treatment gives them an upper hand unfairly. Dragons already have enough going for them, and they don't need this extra boost. I have seen some critique T.rex's poor performance against the prehistoric dragon, and this is why. It doesn't know how to fight a creature it's never seen before. So for example, the prehistoric dragon will be a resident of Cretaceous North America, meaning its competition and prey will be familiar with it and how to combat it. And it too will know how to hunt and battle against its neighbors. Our first survivor is the prehistoric dragon. After conducting a lot of research, and with the help of multiple other people, I've concluded that the prehistoric dragon has physical stats as such. Given its bird-like bones, it would be significantly less dense than dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops. But that said, given the fact it's a 6-meter tall dragon, its body weight would still be well within the 9-ton range. Enormous carnivore, just shy of T.rex in terms of size. But while in the early 2000s and late 90s it was thought that the Hell Creek Formation was a volcanic wasteland, in truth the area is more of a tropical forest/swamp type ecosystem, kind of like the Florida Everglades. Not exactly the best place for a giant flyer. There are more open spaces, however, that would probably be better habitat. Wetland ecosystems in Canada, as well as more open prairies down in Texas and Mexico. It's possible that the dragon would also be in or near Hell Creek, but its advantage of flight would be mitigated immensely by the dense forests. Being so large, it's obviously going to be hunting mostly megafauna, and dealing really only with megafauna predators. In late Cretaceous North America, that's one animal, Tyrannosaurus rex. The documentary showed that the dragons are actually capable of contending a T.rex in physical combat, and both are mutually able to kill one another. A male T.rex causes an adult female dragon such trauma with a single yank on her wing that she dies within the night, and a blast of the dragon's fire into open wounds causes the T.rex to die overnight. Such lethal interaction, though, would be pretty rare among these top predators, as it's just overall very risky. Based on fossil evidence, though, Tyrannosaurus rex was a very aggressive carnivore, battling with their own kind very often, as well as some of the most dangerous land herbivores to ever exist. So chances are they would be dealing with these fire breathers, and more than likely be the more aggressive of the two carnivores. In both the Animal Planet version and the original version, the dragon's fire breath is a weapon of last resort, as it uses up the same gases that the creatures use to fly, since their wings aren't large enough to actually lift their bodies off the ground. A grounded dragon is a much easier target for a large theropod, and while it could contest the Rex, it's very clear that in physical strength, T-Rex had the significant upper hand. Dragons also have a much different breeding system that gives T-Rex an edge competitively as well. Tyrannosaurs more than likely took care of multiple eggs at a single time until they became large enough to fend for themselves. Dragons seem to have one offspring that they raised till basically adulthood, meaning ecologically T-Rex would be the dominant carnivore in the ecosystem. This makes sense given its enormous population within North America at the time. It's also directly stated that T-Rex is a more powerful carnivore overall, though the Animal Planet version does do T-Rex a little dirtier by saying that the dragon is a more astonishing carnivore, and questions whether or not T-Rex actually ruled this era. However, the old documentary also implies that the prehistoric dragon is a new creature to this area and that the T-Rex has actually never seen one before, which could give an explanation to its poor performance in a fight. In this scenario, these will be native animals to the ecosystem, so more than likely they'll be both acquainted with one another. These are both very intelligent carnivores, so more likely than not, they would prefer to avoid each other. Ambushing each other's young, though, seems like a very real possibility, and if it is a fight to the death, I favor T-Rex more times than not because the dragon is very reluctant to use its fire blast. Even when using it, the T-Rex, while scorched, did survive, and we know that T-Rex can survive horrific injuries, including broken necks, and continue to keep going. We never actually see the prehistoric dragon using fire from the air, but they only ever do it against their own kind when competing for females. However, that seems to be the only carnivore that would really put up any kind of fight. The dragons are weaker than T-Rex, but that's not really a statement of weakness, and they're more than likely just bully every other carnivore around, be it dromaeosaur, crocodile, or pterosaur. As for potential prey, this is a more interesting part of the discussion. That's because the dragons, again, usually use their tool of fire for combat, either with other apex predators or with their own species for females. So more likely than not, when it comes to hunting, they're going to use physical strength and weapons against large herbivores. It's mentioned that the adult female was raiding prey from the T-Rex's territory, though we're not quite sure what this would entail. In a physical confrontation, I would favor animals like Triceratops or Ankylosaurus against the prehistoric dragon, though of course blasts of fire, while costly, could net the dragon multiple tons of meat if the cards are played right. The flame, when exposed to open wounds, was able to scorch the skull of a T-Rex, so it could be used against the immense defenses of horns, frills, and armor of the dinosaur herbivores. But even so, it's not an instant kill. Remember, the T-Rex died overnight of exposure, so if a dragon doesn't play its cards right, a Triceratops could truck through the blast and stab it. That would deal an instant killing blow. Ankylosaurus might be a bit of an easier prospect in that it would have a harder time hitting this tall, lanky adversary that can fly. But in turn, it's more well defended against the dragon's melee and projectile attacks thanks to thick armor. A blow from its clubbed tail would also cripple or kill the carnivore, so it would have to play its cards very well. More common prey, however, would likely be animals like Edmontosaurus, which, while having some individuals that would dwarf the dragon's body mass, for the most part that we know of, animals of 3 to 6 tons were much more common than 10-ton giants. These would be much easier prey, especially since the dragon can attack them from the air with its talons, leaving deep scars into its prey, which it can then torch with its fire or let bleed to death quickly. The dragon's smaller head and long neck might imply also that they won't be above taking small prey, such as Pachycephalosaurus, Struthian ornithomimus, and many of the other smaller denizens of late Cretaceous North America, as well as juveniles of other large animals. Dragons living towards the southwest would also be able to feed on young Alamosaurus or carrion of the giant sauropod, but I think it's incredibly unlikely that even this flying, fire-breathing carnivore would try to attack a sauropod 10 times its size, especially when, again, because these are more grounded dragons, their fire is a very costly last resort ability. Skunks don't spray their prey to death after all. However, they also show that they are competent runners, but don't seem to be all that fast. They wouldn't be the greatest long-distance pursuers, which is something theropod dinosaurs are known to be very proficient at. This may be why dragons took to the air in the first place, simply unable to escape a theropod like a T.rex in a straight chase. Large carnivores, however, are consistently able to kill prey larger than themselves. This is a common occurrence with mammals, reptiles, and birds, so I don't see why there would be an exception just for it being in the Mesozoic. Tyrannosaurus rex is perfectly equipped to kill large prey very quickly, but I feel that the prehistoric dragon may take a more prolonged approach, hacking and slashing at its prey before ultimately finishing it with either blunt force trauma or its fire breath. I give the prehistoric dragon a survival rating of 9 out of 10. The only thing really that keeps them from completely dominating the ecosystem are other large megafauna like Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Alamosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus rex. Not much of an L if you ask me. One of the easier dragons to do is the Cenozoic forest dragon, aka the ancestor of the Chinese and Japanese Asian dragons. While this carnivore's size is never directly stated, it is stated to be larger than a tiger. Since it inhabits South China, this would likely be referring to the South China tiger. Big surprise. Basing it off the length of its competition, this means that the forest dragon would likely be about 15 to 16 feet long for this female. Males are likely larger as they are reptiles, with a 4-foot skull, and due to its low-slung body, its height being about the same. A weight estimate is hard to guess, as none is given by the doc, but it should likely be lighter than the mountain dragon, given its overall smaller frame. The juvenile mountain dragon was stated to be 900 pounds, or about 400 kilograms, and that dragon was quite a bit larger than the forest dragon. As a result, I'd say about 500 to 600 pounds is a fair estimate. So how suited is this dragon for the environment? Fairly well. Its color pattern obviously blends it in with the bamboo forest, and its low-slung body helps it sneak up in the forest undergrowth. With a large head and long neck, it could just stick its head out of the bamboo to grab unsuspecting prey. Its flight bladders allow it to move its large body across the forest floor with little noise, and in fact can even glide mile distances. But this dragon is no flyer. Not only does it not have wings large enough to propel it, but its flight bladders can only manage a small glide. As for its fire breath, this species is specifically stated to only use its fire to process food, not as a tool for killing. This means that when engaging with competitors and prey, it will be doing so with its melee weapons only. And this is where the Chinese dragon may struggle. While possessing a large head, which would likely have large jaw muscles, it has a relatively long, thin neck. This means that very large game like rhinos and elephants are absolutely off the table. Game that we know it canonically kills are wild boar. Other prey species would likely include the ancestors of the giant panda, Gigantopithecus, the last of the Calicotheres, many bovines, which I think would be a core part of the dragon's diet, such as bison, water buffalo, gar, auroch, and the Chinese elk Cynomegaloceros. The tiger is of course the main large carnivore within the region. But other extinct taxa, I think, could pose a bit more of a challenge. For example, the cave hyena actually lived in Pleistocene China too. The cave hyena was a larger, more predatory variant of the spotted hyena that currently exists. Ecological studies prove that they are actually more dominant in the ecosystem than larger predators like cave lions, possibly because the cats were social. This is an issue for the forest dragon because while it is larger than a big cat, it's also a solitary carnivore that's less maneuverable, less agile, and likely slower. Of course, there is the gift of fire, which could send a hyena clan scattering. But hyenas are persistent and like to mob larger carnivores like lions, meaning it would be quite difficult for the dragon to truly send them off. Other notable predators include Meganterion, a jaguar-sized saber-toothed cat that's probably the direct ancestor of Smilodon, and arguably cave lions, at least in the more northern parts of China. We don't know the full extent of the forest dragon's range, but we know that their descendants did reach into Japan at some point, so it's possible that they did encounter more carnivores, as well as multiple crocodile species. There's also, of course, the competition of humans. As mentioned in the documentary, fire consistently placed dragons above their competition in their ecosystems. But of course, man, with his ingenuity, learned how to turn fire on the dragons themselves, burning down entire forests and definitely killing the reptiles when they were more vulnerable. However, at least in the Animal Planet version, it's mentioned that this specific female dragon has had experience with tigers before. So perhaps this is not a common occurrence, and it was mentioned that the tiger is a real threat to her survival. This would imply that the forest dragon has quite a bit of trouble dealing with large mammalian carnivores. And when not having the benefit of an ambush, I think the tiger could actually put up a decent fight. A tigress was able to kill 4-meter mugger crocodile after about an hour of fighting, and neither animal was exactly in great shape. So a large male tiger could more than likely kill a forest dragon if its guard is down. In a frontal fight though, the reptile's large skull and long tail could give it an advantage, along with its fire breath if it really feels pressured. And now for our final contender, the mountain dragon, essentially the one you see in all the fairy tales. This animal lived from the Pleistocene into the Holocene, canonically being killed off during the Middle Ages. This carnivore is excessively light, even for a dragon, with a juvenile daughter that's shown to be about 8 feet in height, weighing only about 900 pounds. Although this is when it was mummified, so it would have lost a lot of water weight and other things. Most likely she weighed about half a ton in life. Scaling that up to the full-sized adult, this means that the female is more than likely 2 tons. But with such physical size, despite the lack of body mass, it's quite clear that the mountain dragon was the largest carnivore in Pleistocene Eurasia. We also learned that a male from the species was living in the Atlas Mountains, implying that they had a bit more of a global range. Their diet is left somewhat vague in the original version, but it is stated that they fed on the wild herds that were then domesticated. This would imply that they fed on a variety of hoofed animals, including horses, cattle like auroch, sheep, goats, likely bison as well. The Animal Planet version states that they once hunted mammoths.
The distant ancestors of this female mountain dragon first emerged from the waters to the east, following the great mammoth caravans crossing over the plains below. But the mammoths have long since disappeared. Dragons are disappearing too. Human pressures have forced them into the highest and most remote parts of their range. The territory this female patrols is still just beyond the reach of humans. With summer once more drawing to a close, she and her baby need energy stores before they fall into torpor and shut down for the coldest winter months. Wild game is getting harder to come by as more people push into her territorial hunting grounds. A predator that once took down mammoths now gets by on plundered sheep.
Though given their lack of physical size, it was more than likely calves that were taken. Of course, the gift of fire seems to be something that they retain from their ancestors, and not only that, they seem more than willing to use it against enemies such as humans and each other. Though still, these dragons do not seem to use it during hunting, given the fact that the sheep carcass that the female brings back isn't burned even slightly. Despite its lack of physical size, the dragons are remarkably powerful. It is mentioned in an official source that their tail swipe could sever a man's arm. That sort of physical strength is something you don't really see in many mammal predators, and even few in reptiles. Crocodiles usually need a good grip before they do something like that. We're shown that an injured female could kill people through their male armor. If these dragons had a wide variety in diet, then they could live mostly anywhere during Pleistocene Eurasia, nesting on cliffs or in secluded areas for their eggs to stay warm and hidden. These predators were very large. In terms of competition, Pleistocene Eurasia is quite strange compared to North America at the time. That being that the big cats and bears seem to not really be as dominant in the food chain. Isotopic analysis shows that hyenas were actually probably the more dominant predator over single cave lions and even large bears. A dragon could easily scatter a group of hyenas from their kill, since hyenas tend to be a bit more skittish. I see the only real competitors to the mountain dragon being possibly a group of Homotherium, which, being known to hunt elephants across much of the world, would probably not be too opposed to taking on something the size of the mountain dragon. Possibly the only predator in its weight class, however, would be the steppe brown bear, a large species of the brown bear, which averaged a body mass of 700 to 800 kilograms, and the largest ones being well over 1,000 kilos. In freedom speak, that's a 1,500 to 2,000 pound bear that loves meat. Would probably be intimidated when this massive beast stands on its hind leg. Of course, fire, the great equalizer, could mean that the dragon would still dominate an encounter, but I think it would be much more interesting than the documentary lets on. Since these dragons are reluctant to use their fire, the bear actually has a pretty good shot of taking one down. Humans, of course, humaned and wiped out most of the megafauna, along with climate change in most of Eurasia, and the mammoth steppe disappeared. Even without humans, it's possible that the dragon would still be in critical danger in the Holocene, given the fact that the mammoth steppe, where most of its prey base existed, disappeared. The fact that these dragons survived into the Holocene, however, and even into the Middle Ages, shows that they can survive under quite a lot of ecological stress. Most suggest that the extinctions in Pleistocene Europe were caused primarily by climate change. Humans didn't help, of course, but cave hyenas seem to be competing with humans just fine and yet went extinct. So I believe the mountain dragon would still retain its status as an Ice Age survivor, and the largest carnivore in Europe and Asia throughout. Europe became much more forested, which for a large predator like the mountain dragon would be quite the detriment to its hunting ability. Large game still became quite scarce, but there were plenty of species it could still feed on, like bison and auroch, at least until humans humaned and eventually drove these mighty dragons to extinction. But humans aren't all bad after all. As you know, there's currently the fundraiser going on, so go ahead and check out Gifts from Goji if you want to donate to St. Jude's Children's Hospital and make a difference this holiday season. Don't let these children's hopes go the way of the dragon.